Let's face it, everything that we are experiencing here in the United States isn't just limited to the election season. Everything seems to get a little heightened during election season, but it wouldn't be so heightened during the election season if there wasn't this undercurrent of a shit show that's been happening 24/7 for a long time. So I want to focus on giving some mindfulness specific ways that you can regulate yourself to find more peace and calm as you go through the elections. The reality is, you got to get your own shit together. I don't care if you are blue, red, purple, or nothing. We need to get our own selves together first before you go out and try and engage with the rest of the world.
Welcome to the GenX Shift podcast, a show for Gen Xers who are navigating some pretty tough transitions and aren't sure how to move forward. I'm your host, Michelle Walter, proud Gen Xer, former lawyer turned entrepreneur, huge Jason Momoa fan, and margarita snob. And I've navigated a lot of transitions in my life, from losing my mom suddenly to a heart attack to starting my own business. But I often did it all on my own because I was too stubborn to ask for help. Now I'm on a mission to give actionable strategies to other Gen Xers so that they can find the confidence, courage, and clarity they need to make a shift. So let's rock and roll.
Hey Gen Xers, welcome back to the podcast this week. I have another solo shorty episode for you because I wanted to give all my Gen X peeps out there a special survival guide for navigating the 2024 elections and beyond. Because let's face it, everything that we are experiencing here in the United States, at least, if you're listening from someplace else, welcome. I'm sure you've also been aware of what's happening in the United States. Everything that we are experiencing isn't just limited to the election season. Everything seems to get a little heightened during election season, but it wouldn't be so heightened during the election season if there wasn't this undercurrent of a shit show that's been happening 24/7 for a long time. So I want to give some practical, digestible, mindfulness meditation related tips to help support you as you go about the election on November 5th. I completely lose track of what day it is, November 5th, and even post-election. There are a lot of, actually there's a lot, I have noticed a lot of tips circulating around right now about dealing with election anxiety, which this didn't used to be the case. Even 10 years ago, this didn't used to be the case. A lot of these tips are great. There are things like engage in healthy distractions. I heard on a podcast this morning about how the San Diego Zoo is going to live stream animal footage to help people ease their election anxiety. Those are great. By all means, engage in those things. I want to focus on giving some mindfulness specific ways that you can regulate yourself to find more peace and calm as you go through the elections on Tuesday and even beyond, because let's face it, we're probably not going to know the results on Tuesday. And even when we get past these election results, we're still going to be dealing with this undercurrent of shit show that is aggravating the anxiety that we are now, a lot of us, experiencing during this election. And if you're someone who isn't experiencing election anxiety, great. I'm glad to hear it. And you're probably going to find something that you can take away from these tips anyway, because these are things that we can use on a daily basis. So this is why I say it's for the elections and beyond. Because look, the reality is you got to get your own shit together. First and foremost, I don't care if you are blue, red, purple, or nothing. We need to get our own selves together first before you go out and try and engage with the rest of the world. I originally was going to start out this podcast talking about how we tend to approach elections and our world in general through the lens of seeing people as the other. I decided to scrap that, save it for another episode, and focus just on this survival guide. But I do want to note that the way in which we often engage in our world nowadays stems from this attachment that we have to othering people, to seeing people as separate, as different from us. And I don't mean appreciating differences. We, of course, want to appreciate differences, but we often see differences as a place of division. When we engage in this othering mentality, as what my meditation teacher Tara Brach calls this unreal othering, what it does is makes us carry the burden. You as the individual. And so what I want to do through these practical survival guide tips today is to invite you to start with your damn self. Because you cannot do the political advocacy, the social advocacy, the religious advocacy, I don't care what it is. You can't do that work in the world if you are out there dysregulated and reactive. So these tips today are designed to help you regulate in yourself, in your body first, before you even try and go out and engage with the rest of the world. So please go watch happy animal videos if that helps. I know I'm probably going to be watching some of those. And remember that those kind of even healthy distractions take you out of yourself, your own experience, and the present moment, which is where we need to start. So I want to walk through first, before I get through the 5 survival tips that I'm going to share, I want to walk through first just some of the emotions that I noticed coming up for myself and for other people around these elections. And the reason I want to kind of flag the emotions first is because our tendency can be to want to turn away from those emotions, to ignore them, stuff them down, swallow them. And please know that what you try and swallow actually ends up swallowing you. So with mindfulness meditation, we learn to create the capacity within ourselves to be with whatever emotions and experience that we are having in the moment. And the reason we want to be with, instead of push away, avoid, stuff down, or swallow, is because only when we are able to be with can we respond wisely instead of reacting unwisely. And that's a distinction that I'm going to make a lot here today. Because if we are just lashing out at other people, or if we are shutting down, we are reacting unwisely. And again, you have important work that you want to be doing. Even if you don't have work that you think you want to be doing, you have a life that you want to show up for every day. And so we want to be able to do that from a wise place of response and instead of from a knee-jerk place of reaction. So we need to start becoming aware of the emotions that we're experiencing, because honestly, a lot of Gen Xers are so great at being unaware of what we are experiencing. We weren't raised to be in touch with our emotions. And if you think that's a phrase that makes you weak or passive, I'm here to tell you another story, because that is not the case. It takes courage and strength and willingness to turn toward some of these more challenging emotions that we're going to be facing around the elections and beyond. So let me walk through some of these emotions that I've been noticing. And the first one is there's a lot of anger. Dear God, there's a lot of anger out there. It's palpable. That energy, all of our energy, is actually palpable. Our nervous systems are nothing but radio beacons emitting how we are feeling and picking up on how other people are feeling. Anger gets a bad rap for very justified reasons. All human emotions, including anger, are valid and have their place. They all can have advantages and disadvantages. So anger can actually be a very intelligent emotion because it can cue us in to what else is going on beneath the surface. There are ways that anger can be used healthily. Often we see it displayed unhealthily. In my coaching world, and from the school that I went to and got my coaching certificate, the Institute for Professional Excellence in Coaching, IPEC, we learned how anger represents an energy experience that we call level 2. We, in my coaching vernacular, deal with 7 levels of energy. And just for background, energy that we experience can be catabolic, which is the heavier energy, or anabolic, which is lighter energy. And we can experience kind of a combination of fluidity of both of these. It's not to say that catabolic is bad and anabolic is only good. Again, there are ways that each can have their advantage and disadvantage. So we want to learn to be more aware of how that energy is showing up in us so that we can start to choose more wisely our response to a situation instead of reacting to it, almost like we have no choice. Because we can choose our response to situations. We can't always choose a situation, but we can respond. We can choose how we respond to it. So anger is a heavier catabolic energy. And I'm going to get into our nervous systems a little bit more here in a moment. But that catabolic energy can be very draining on us and cause us to burn out and really take a toll on us if we stay in it for prolonged periods of time. And catabolic energy can be very productive because it can spur us into taking action. So maybe you've noticed that sometimes you feel a little victim-y, like the world is out to get you, like you can never win, everything you do is wrong. That's kind of what we call a level 1 energy experience. And in that level 1 experience, you're often not taking any action. You're probably just checking out, laying on the couch, watching Netflix, shutting down. There are good reasons for that. In order to get us off the couch, in order to take some action, we want to be able to come up into a level 2 energy experience, which often looks like anger. Anger is just one emotion that can be associated with that level 2 catabolic energy. So that big background is a way to say that anger can be productive for us. Anger is what can fuel us to take action towards something that we're passionate about. Anger also, as I said, is used in ways that are not healthy, like lashing out at other people, taking things out on other people. Ruth King, who is a mindfulness teacher and a racial justice advocate and author, she says that anger is not transformative. It's initiatory, meaning that anger can spur us into action. And when we learn to take that action from a wise place, as opposed to lashing out in anger, which is really fear, from an unwise place, that's how we can move into doing things that we care about, fighting for things that we care about. So what I have seen happen here is oftentimes we get angry about the quote other political side. And I am again using that othering term in the sense that we like to separate ourselves from the other quote political party or the other team or the other religion, whatever it is. When we are angry at the other side, that can often turn into resentment and blame. And resentment and blame can be a very toxic cocktail of level 1, level 2 catabolic energy that is not healthy for us. Tara Brach, I'm going to quote from her book, Radical Compassion, writes that blame and resentment quote, lead us to react from fear rather than to respond to our circumstances with wisdom. And it separates us from others, undermining understanding, empathy, and intimacy. So when your anger has turned into resentment and blame, that's taken a toll on you. Do you think the other person really gives a crap? If you're angry at them, if you're resenting them, if you're blaming them? No. So we want to learn to recognize when anger is coming up for us and how we can use that anger in a healthy, productive way to take wise action instead of letting anger control us, turn into blame and resentment, and taking unwise reactive steps that lash out at other people or other things. Okay. So anger is like the big one that I have seen a lot of. And the survival tips I'm going to share, we're going to learn how to ease that anger a little bit and be able to tap into it in more productive, healthy ways. Another emotion I see showing up a lot is sadness. There's just a lot of sadness. People are sad, distressed, depressed about what's happening in the world, what's happening with the elections, what we fear might happen with the elections. So being able to name that, yeah, I'm sad. There's sadness coming up in me. And one of the tips I have will help address that. Sadness often has a lot of unhealed grief underneath it. So if you're noticing yourself be sad, I want you to get curious about what grief is underneath this that I haven't addressed, that I haven't given some space to. Another emotion that comes up is stress. So I'm going to talk about stress, overwhelm, and anxiety. Brené Brown talks about stress as a reaction to situations where we can see what's happened and kind of been a trigger and we get stressed. As Brené Brown describes, stress is when we're, quote, in the weeds. When we feel stressed, we feel like the demands that are being put upon us are beyond our ability to cope. And with effort, we can still find a way to move through it. We can still kind of get through our days, right? So we feel like we can't cope because of what's being imposed on us. And we're still able to sort of get up and move and find a way through it. Overwhelm comes in when, as Brené Brown says, we get blown. Like we have just maxed out our capacity. The stress has become so intense that we actually can't function or we can't take action. Overwhelm can sometimes, not always, be a sign of anxiety. So anxiety usually lingers for longer periods of time. And oftentimes we don't know why we're feeling anxious. And without getting too into the weeds here, anxiety can be caused by a lot of different things, but just know that anxiety tends to be more prolonged and has that kind of catabolic, that heavy energy toll on us that really drains us and over time leads to burnout or completely shutting down or completely lashing out. So those are some of the core emotions that I've noticed coming up: anger, sadness, stress, overwhelm, anxiety. You might be experiencing something different. You might be experiencing all of those in a 30-second time span, right? They can all kind of feed into each other too. You can notice that you're feeling anxious, which then makes you feel kind of sad or depressed. And then maybe after you've been sad or depressed for a while, you notice yourself kind of getting pissed off and you get angry. And then maybe if you're angry and you're doing a lot to address your anger, you start to get kind of stressed because now there's a whole lot coming up for you that feels like it's demanding your time and your attention, your emotions. So all of these emotions can kind of create a cycle. So what do we do when we're caught in that cycle, when we notice these emotions coming up, when we're hearing the election results coming in because we're glued to the TV, watching them stream in lifetime? These are the 5 tips that I want to give you as your survival guide. I have a cheat sheet for this. As usual, download it. If you want to pause the audio video right now, go download it so you can follow along. But you can have this at the ready, have it next to you on the couch as you're watching the election results come in, and practice these in real time, because these are real practical things that you can do right now to start addressing the anger, the sadness, the stress, overwhelm, anxiety, whatever might be coming up for you. Now, let me say, before I move into these, that all of these emotions I talked about, that kind of catabolic energy, that heaviness, impacts our nervous system. And I talked about this a little bit in episode 23 about how our survival response gets activated into states of fight, flight, or freeze. There are some other survival states, but I'm going to focus just on those three. When we're in any one of those survival responses, what is happening in our bodies is that our hormones that are flowing through our body, like adrenaline and cortisol, are there to literally help us survive. And when we're in that survival response, we're not thinking clearly. And the reason we're not thinking clearly is because our amygdala is activated and our executive function is being shut down, because we just need to survive. We don't need to think clearly or analyze. We just need to run away, fight, or play dead. So that's a basic overview of what's happening when you're experiencing anger, sadness, stress, overwhelm, or anxiety, or any of those heavier catabolic emotions, is that your survival response, your nervous system, is being activated in a way that causes you to fight, flight, or freeze, and therefore not think clearly, thus reacting unwisely instead of responding wisely. So with these 5 tips, we want to learn how to down-regulate that survival response, bring it some ease and comfort and calm and peace so that we can think clearly, so that we can respond wisely. All right. Survival tip number 1. Very basic. Plant your feet, take a breath. All this means is that whether you're sitting or standing, even when you're standing in line at the grocery store, is I want you to pick up your right foot, slowly place it on the ground, pick up your left foot, slowly place it on the ground. Take an inhale for about 4 seconds, and then exhale longer than the inhale for about 6 to 8 seconds. We know that feeling, from science, by the way, that feeling that contact between your feet and the ground can help to literally ground you, to help you remember that you are connected to the earth. Now, if you aren't able to feel your feet on the ground, or you're not able to move your feet, that's okay. You might be able to just envision yourself doing that, or you might be able to sense into how you are sitting or laying so that you can start to notice that connection with the earth. We're trying to establish a connection with the ground, okay? And then the breath. I know that it pisses some people off when somebody tells you to take a breath. I get it. I am inviting you to take a breath because we know from science that it helps to down-regulate your nervous system to help bring you out of that survival response. And especially taking a longer exhale than the inhale calms your nervous system. It indicates to your nervous system that it's okay. I'm safe. It's okay. So that it starts to down-regulate the adrenaline and the cortisol, starts to activate some of the more feel-good hormones, that like endorphins, that will help you to be able to think more clearly. So 2 feet, 1 breath. Find some connection to the earth. Take an inhale and exhale for a longer period of time. And do that as many times as you need to until you can feel yourself start to settle. You will notice that in your body. If you keep taking an inhale and exhale, sensing that connection, you'll start to gradually feel your system settle. And if you don't, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with you. It just means you might be hyper activated in your nervous system, and that's okay. Don't judge yourself. Don't try and force it. Don't say it's not working because I'm not feeling better. Come back to the practice later. Remember that with time, your body can start to get used to taking those deep inhales and those longer exhales. And over time, you can start to feel more settled. So don't worry if you feel like it doesn't work right away. That's normal. The second survival tip, and this kind of gets into not judging yourself, is to show yourself compassion. So when you notice that you're activated or triggered by something going on with the elections or somebody from the other political party who's really pissing you off, connect to yourself and recognize that this is a moment of pain that you are experiencing. So there's 3 steps to showing yourself compassion, which I take from Dr. Kristen Neff and Dr. Christopher Germer. And these 3 steps are, which are in your cheat sheet. Number 1, recognize that this is a painful moment. Don't say, I am in pain, because then you're identifying with the pain. Recognize this is a painful moment, or this is a moment of pain. This is a painful experience that's happening right now. The second step is to remember that other people are also in pain. That's not to take away or denigrate or minimize your pain. It's to remind you that you are not alone, that other human beings also are experiencing pain. So you are connected to other people through that experience of pain. And sometimes that reminder that we're not alone can help us connect not only to ourselves, but to other people, to take us out of the thought that I'm all alone in my pain. And then the third step is just to be nice to yourself. Show yourself some kindness. That might look like placing a hand on your heart. It might look like taking a deep inhale and exhale, 2 feet, 1 breath. Maybe it looks like taking a walk or getting a warm drink or petting the dog or cat. Saying something nice to yourself, like, it's okay, I'm here. Yeah, this sucks. It's okay that I'm upset. Something that you would say or do for yourself that you might say or do for a good friend, you can also do for yourself. So recognize that this is a painful moment. Remember that you are connected to other people because everybody's experiencing pain in one way or another. And be nice to yourself, just like you would be nice to a friend who is experiencing something similar. So that's survival tip number 2, is show yourself some compassion, some kindness. Survival tip number 3, once you have taken a breath, established your connection to the ground, shown yourself some kindness, then it might be time to remember that all human beings are in this, regardless of how they voted, regardless of what they believe. You can remember that we are all connected with these 3 words, just like me. Now, why would you want to think just like me with somebody who is on the complete, quote, opposite end of the political spectrum from you? Because at the end of the day, we are more alike than we are different. And when we get into focusing only on our differences, only on what divides us, that's when we create that unreal othering. And that's when we really create more of a burden on ourselves than we're creating for anybody else. And how that manifests then is that we create a world of division among everyone. So we want to start as small as we need to by remembering that just like me, this is another human being. Just like me, this person puts their pants on every day, or their skirt, or their shorts, or whatever it is. Just like me, this person takes a crap every day. Just like me, this person breathes. Just like me, this person worries about money. Just like me, this person wants to be healthy. Just like me, this person is afraid. Just like me can kind of take some of the wind out of your judgy sails. The sails that get puffed up, that are full of your judgments of the, quote, other people and how righteous and correct and right you are. It can help take some of the wind out of those sails, which helps to downregulate that survival response, which if you're judging other people, oftentimes is a fight response. So when you can say, just like me, it helps to take some of the wind out of that survival fight response that you might be experiencing when you're judging other people. The 4th survival tip is I invite you to find equanimity. Equanimity is probably one of my favorite words, and what it means is the ability to find peace and calm in the midst of the storm, in the middle of chaos. I don't remember if I've shared this story before, but it's worth sharing again. My meditation teacher, Tara Brock, shared this story in our mindfulness training about a woman who was in Tara's DC meditation group, Washington, DC. And this woman, I don't think Tara shared her name, and I don't remember all the facts of the situation, but this woman went to Africa to volunteer on some type of aid mission. And the village where she was came under attack. And so the woman and other people in the village ran for cover, literally as bullets are whizzing around their head. And she ducked behind a rock or a tree with some other people. And because she'd been practicing mindfulness meditation for so long, she remembered her practice. She came back to her breath, to herself, to the moment, regulated her nervous system with her breath, was able to find compassion for herself in that moment, recognizing this is really scary, this is really hard, it's really challenging. And she was also connected to and in it with other people. And so she was able to look at them in the eye, to help regulate them, to help keep herself and them calm so that they could think clearly, respond wisely, and get out of the situation safely. That's equanimity. So if that can be practiced when bullets are literally flying around your head, I think you can probably practice it in response to the elections or anything else in life. Equanimity, like everything mindfulness related, is a practice. But to start to kind of crack open the door of equanimity for you, I want you to find a phrase that allows you to find that calm, centered feeling in the midst of the storm. And that phrase can look something like, this moment will not last. This moment is temporary. This is how it is right now. You can even say, in this moment, I am okay. I know that can be a tough one. And if you can remember that even when you are experiencing pain, if you can come to your breath, if you can be aware of your breath, aware of yourself, in that moment, you are okay. It is okay. You can even say it is what it is. Find something that allows you to kind of release your grip on everything that's happening, to release the judgments of what's happening and other people, that brings you into the present moment to recognize that this moment will pass. This too shall pass. So find some phrase that allows you to tap into that moment where you ground in, find your calm, take a breath, and know that this too shall pass. The last survival tip is I want you to start to see the stories. Everything is a story. Your perspectives, background, experiences all form your view of life, your story of life, your story about yourself, your story about other people and situations. We get very attached to our stories. We can start to see the stories that we're telling ourselves about other people, about other situations, and even about ourselves. And the reason that we want to do that is because we want to invite in curiosity to recognize that there are other stories. So even when we feel righteous and right and correct and moral, there are other stories. And the reason that we want to recognize that there are other stories is, again, to start to regulate our nervous system, to find that place of equanimity so that we can respond with more wisdom to whatever story is being told. And we can do that with two phrases, two questions. The first question, what story am I telling? What story am I telling about this person? What story am I telling about this situation? What story am I telling about myself? Just get curious about what story am I telling? And then the second question is, what other story is there? What other story is there about this person? What other story is there about the situation? What other story might there be about myself? Asking those two questions isn't going to change anything. It's not even necessarily going to change your mind or your perspective. What we are trying to do is create space and capacity for us to see that things are not always how we see them. And if we can step behind our thoughts and our reactions about the situation and start to just be the observer, then we can create more space and capacity to respond wisely instead of react unwisely. When we get curious about the stories that we're telling and what other stories there might be, we might be able to say, just like me, that person is afraid for their family. Just like me, that person feels oppressed. All of this can help us create connection back to ourselves as well as other human beings. Because remember, human beings are all in this together. Even if it feels like we are at each other's throats, that we are on, quote, opposite sides, that we are hurting each other, what we do to each other, we do to ourselves. Hear that again. What we do to each other, we do to ourselves. So the anger you have towards somebody else or their actions is anger that is impacting you. The sadness you feel over seeing somebody else taken advantage of is sadness that is impacting you. So we want to learn with mindfulness to be able to create the awareness of and the space around these emotions so that we don't get swept away in them and start taking all these crazy knee-jerk reactions, and instead get curious about what's actually happening. What's coming up for me? What might be coming up for somebody else? And how can I find the reserves and resources within me to respond and take action that actually feels wise and supportive and kind? So, download your cheat sheet for these survival tips. Remember, please remember, let's all find a little more space in ourselves to be kind and compassionate for ourselves and for other people. Because the hatred that we are experiencing right now isn't getting anybody anywhere. There's a fabulous quote by James Baldwin where he says, "I imagine one of the reasons people cling to their hates so stubbornly is because they sense once hate is gone, they will be forced to deal with the pain." So if we can remember, just like me, other people are in pain. Remember that we're connected through our experience of pain, as well as our experiences of joy and happiness and sadness. So in this 2024 election cycle and beyond, when it seems like everything is calling on us to fight and be angry and hate each other and divide us, use this survival guide to clean up your own shit first before you go out and try and do anything in the world. As always, let me know if you have any questions or your reflections on these practices. You can send me an email at podcast@lifefromthesummit.com. It helps if you can, wherever you're listening or watching this podcast, if you can leave a comment, review it. It helps kick it up in the algorithms so that more people can get wind of it. And please take care of yourself. Take care of yourself first. That silly airplane message that we get, I haven't flown in years. but about put your own mask on first before everybody else. You hear that all the time. Put your own mask on first. Take care of your own shit first before you start worrying about other people. Come back to your breath. Come back to yourself. Come back to the present moment. Find your equanimity. Find connection to yourself and to other people. Regulate your nervous system. And then go do the important work that you have to do, because you have important work to do. And until next time, stay gold, Gen Xers.